of nature, with the miraculous, and thereby gain an experience of God. More than this, there has recently spread in the world something which has often existed in strong currents within civilization and has had continuity within Eastern civilizations, what is known as the movement for spiritual awareness. This has affected the Western world, especially its youth, so that today there are a multitude of cults and meditation movements that, in contrast to the materialistic values and experiences which are stressed by so much of external civilization, be it Western or be it communist, has brought man to realization there is a world within, deep within, wherein he can experience also the core which lies within nature, and he can thereby find an inner fulfillment that cannot be found in any of the superficial experiences which man follows, and which is described as giving man the ability to gain a unity with the ground of being, be it the ground of his own being or the being that lies beyond nature, which is a literal translation of the. We must learn not to gain a ourselves to words. We have to look at the concept that lies behind the words. And as we've explained, God, as he is understood in our tradition, is the absolute source of being towards which man can relate himself. Therefore, through the process of introspection and meditation, every human being can gain an experience of the reality of God. As has also been shown by many in-depth psychologists, and this is a terminology used regularly by Jung, that man's consciousness as an individual living in space and time, separated by his body, by all his physical functions from his fellow man, has at its root a common unconscious, an existence within wherein he is not separate from other human beings, wherein he is not separate from nature, wherein there is a constant stream that binds him with the root of all existence. These are just other words for the concept of neshama, the soul, which means the breath of God, which, according to the ideals and ideas of the Tanakh, of the Jewish Bible, pervades all existence and gains an individualized form in the root of every human being. And that soul expresses itself then in a ruach, in a spirit, and in a nefesh, in a physical life force, which together comprise the human personality. Therefore, if a person will delve deep within himself, he will gain a realization of the spiritual reality that exists within him and that exists within the world. And this brings us to the manifold incidences of religious experience wherein man is overwhelmed by the power of God that enters into all aspects of his life, which with the great saints becomes a concept of constant communion from within with God, of devekut, of having an inner clinging with the root of all being, and with the mystics leading them to a situation wherein the greatest reality in their life is God's power, and they reach the most elevated experiences that incorporate all other experiences through the mystical union with God. So we have shown that the whole gamut of human emotions, if they are led back to their root, bring us to God. But there is another avenue within man which can show us that God exists. For though we have dealt with the varied human emotions, there is a special element within man which is not that which man is, but something quite different. That which man ought to be. And each one of us have within ourselves very differing emotions at differing times, which describe our characters and personalities. But in addition, we have an aspect of our personality which tells us what to do, the human conscience, which is separate from the other emotions because it directs the emotions. It is separate from reason because reason analyzes that which is but cannot dictate and compel that which ought to be. So the will of man, directing to him as well as to others what is right and wrong, is a dimension which is described by Kant as an expression not of pure reason when applied to man, but of his practical reason, as being a categorical imperative belonging to a different dimension within the human psyche than all the others. And it's this moral categorical imperative which cannot be understood except as being an absolute standard that enters into the existence of man from above. As Professor Waterhouse has described in his work, The Religious Basis for Morality, that morality, which is not based upon the concept of the absolute power of God, is weak, relative, subjective, and the two need to be related. As it is described by the prophet Micha, it has been told to you, O man, that which is good, and that which God demands from you, to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Here we have, in this phrase, a unification between the principle of moral autonomy that man as a human being has from within himself, a conscience that directs him to do right and tells him to keep away from wrong, but that in order that this should be firmly based, he requires a revelation from outside, and the two are intertwined, as well already recognized by the Kantian, the Neo-Kantian philosophers, and as they themselves saw expressed in the 19th chapter of the Psalms, where first there is a description of the way in which the heavens declare the glory of God. That is the teleological argument. And then in the middle it goes over to the moral argument. It says, the Torah Hashem Tamima, the Torah of Hashem is perfect, restores the soul. The moral law of God demonstrates God himself.